Hello, hello, everybody. We are getting things set up here. I'm going to go ahead and start my presentation. All right, thank you all for joining us this evening for a very special K-12 education team webinar here brought to you by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And this evening we're focused on place-based storytelling, and we're going to be kind of approaching that through the lens of using ArcGIS Story Maps. But while we let some folks join us here this evening, I just want to remind everybody, one, that the webinar is being recorded, and so we'll post the recording for this evening's session about a week from today on our YouTube channel, which will give you information on how to find that here towards the end. Um, and yeah, so while we're waiting for some folks to get logged in here, why don't we turn a question over to the chat? And I want to know, what are some interesting birds that you all have been seeing in your neck of the woods, wherever you're joining us from? What are some where we could open it up to just general wildlife, but of course we're going to focus on birds. Oh, a swallow-tailed kite. Amazing. Carolyn, where are you joining us from? Roseate spoonbills, you guys must be in the South. Those are two of my very favorite birds. So you kind of came in hot with those answers. Yeah, Houston, St. Augustine, a pin-tailed whydah. That's amazing. We do love the robin, even though we see them all the time up here. They're still wonderful birds. Blue-winged warbler. That's a good. I saw that on somebody's eBird list for Tompkins this week. I was not lucky enough to see it myself, but it was a colleague, so I trust them. A Puerto Rican lizard cuckoo? That is amazing. Michael, where are you joining us from? I'm gonna guess Puerto Rico based on the answer. Oh, hey, Susanna. Hey, how's it going? Broad-tailed hummingbird in New Mexico. Awesome. Well, thank you for that, folks. I always like to hear kind of what's going on wherever you're joining us from. And, up here in upstate New York, we're just starting to kind of round the corner towards spring, believe it or not. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started for the evening. Okay, so just wanted to start things off by reiterating the mission that we share here at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, which is to interpret and conserve the Earth's biological diversity through research, education, and participatory science focused on birds and nature. So we hope that this evening's topic is enriching for everybody, and we're really happy to have you here joining us this evening. All right, so what do we have on the agenda? First and foremost, we're going to talk a little bit about what makes a story place-based and kind of maybe some of the value added from focusing on location when we tell stories. We're going to pass things over to our special guest, Katharine Perkin, who is going to walk us through a little bit of information about GIS as a technology and as a science, and is also going to go through a demo of how to create a story map, which is kind of the exciting part of the evening. And then at the end, we are going to kind of bounce back to talking about what are some resources that are available to you as educators if you plan to adopt Esri into your classrooms. Or maybe, that seems like a heavy lift for you. And so you just are looking for some story maps that you might be able to use as a presentation in your classroom. So we'll show you those as well. Okay, so let's start with a little bit of conversation about place-based storytelling. Okay, so when I was trying to come up with topics that were going to be interesting for you all, thinking about new ways to tell stories in the classroom was at the top of my mind. And of course, story maps came came up as a really great way to do that, that I certainly wish that I had been introduced to sooner. Um, and, as educators, regardless of what you're teaching or what kind of setting you're teaching in, you are all storytellers. So I'm sure we have examples of information that we learned at some point or another in school that we remember because of the story that they're tied to, maybe more than the facts behind the information itself. So really excited to introduce you all to this as a concept. Okay. So let's take a little moment and tell us in the chat, what are some potential outcomes that you might expect from introducing this type of um, way of presenting into your classroom? What are the benefits of focusing on location when we tell stories? And I'll be looking over into the chat to see some of your responses here. Yes, definitely. So Connie said connection with personal experiences. Absolutely. Irene, yeah, feeling a sense of pride in your local community. I think that that's a really big one. Yeah, Carolyn, greater personal connection to the land. These are all great responses, you all. Yeah, getting a sense of scale. Brian, Nicole, yeah, deepening understanding in relation to place. Yeah, so there it's not a misleading question by any stretch. If we're talking about location-based storytelling or place-based storytelling, we are kind of just focusing on the location aspect. And I think you'd be hard-pressed to tell any sort of stories that didn't involve location in one sense or another. So here's just some potential outcomes that I wanted to focus on for a minute. So first and foremost, you can connect a local phenomenon to a broader pattern. So, just a quick example that I thought of based on my time in the classroom is, you could walk around your school grounds or the school facility itself and use participatory science apps like iNaturalist to identify plants with your students and look at, invasive versus native, see, do we have a local population of this native species here, this invasive plant, and where is that in relation to our school? Is this like a regional spread? So you can connect what's going on right outside your door with things that are maybe happening on a larger scale or even globally. Um, Number two, I think, is what you all focused on a lot in your answers, which is fantastic because I think that's what a lot of folks think of when they think of place-based storytelling, kind of showing the emotional human side of the story, and drawing a connection to peoples and cultures and locations. And I saw a few folks also kind of hit on the third point there, which is it promotes stewardship. It brings folks closer to the places that they call home. It can also help you create a connection with a place that might be on the other side of the planet. And that's something that I think is really beautiful about the technology that we're going to be exploring today, is that with relative ease, you could be studying something 50 feet outside your front door or something, a 5 hour flight away, 5,000 miles away, all with a few clicks. And so that's something I'm really excited to introduce you all to. All right. So in just a moment here, I'm going to pass things over to our special guest, Katharine. Okay. So Um, Catherine began her Encore GIS career nearly 7 years ago after a decade in hospitality and now provides geospatial solutions across a wide range of applications, specializing in the nonprofit sector. She's currently working on her thesis for the Geospatial Intelligence and Geoinformations Masters of Science degree at George Mason University, where she finished her Bachelor of Science in Geography with an environmental science minor in 2023. And let me tell you, folks, Catherine is not only a friend of mine, but a former colleague as well. And she is the person that really opened my eyes to the power and the possibility of the applications that we're going to be talking about this evening and the technology of GIS at large. So in a short period of time, I went from really not knowing even what Esri was to using these tools day in and day out in my work. And I really could not have done that without her tutelage. So we have an expert here this evening to walk us through things. So with that, I will go ahead and pass things over to you, Catherine.
Great, thank you so much, Greg. I really appreciate the opportunity to share this thing that I'm so passionate about with all of you. So before I get started, I just wanted to kind of take a pulse test. Has anybody heard of GIS before? That's Geographic Information Science, sometimes also systems. Does anybody have any familiarity? Okay, great. Lots of yeses so far. It's okay if you don't. This is very high level, kind of introductory to these topics and also some of the cool products that can come from it. So I will go ahead and start my screen share. Let's see. All righty. Am I coming through, Greg?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, so GIS, the science of where. Geographic Information Science, also sometimes system is substituted, is kind of like a digital sandbox for students to kind of visualize problems within their own local neighborhood and see how it's connected and related to the rest of the world. Nearly everything today has some sort of spatial component, meaning that it relates to some place on Earth in some sort of capacity. And it's really powerful for allowing us to relate and connect events, people, and things across both time and space. It's a tool and also a kind of mathematical concept and hard science. It's a science and a solution, as I like to say, with the mathematical concepts being related to kind of relating our 3D world to this kind of 2D XY plane and all of the kind of algorithms and complexities that come along with it. But it's also a tool that we can apply to problems to discover patterns and visualize things that maybe aren't necessarily apparent from kind of a kind of tabular data view that kind of enhances that when we get that kind of overhead view looking at it spatially. It's also very interdisciplinary and globalized. It's pretty much in every single industry and use case that you can think of, and it's used across the world and also in space. So it is kind of emerging more and more as people begin to recognize this technology that you probably use in your everyday life. Um, this is probably one of my favorite graphics to use in kind of uh, articulating how we take the real world and all of its nuances, and some things are tangible and some things aren't, and how do we take that into the GIS model, which creates our real world into these kind of data slices or layers, as they're often referred to, that kind of create these discrete data components that we can combine and overlay and analyze with. And you'll see that some of these things are like, physical features on the planet, like elevations, very much tangible. Same thing with water features. But then you have some kind of more nebulous concepts like boundaries. You can't really see a state line or a, county line. And same thing with addresses, but they are very much real things in our real world. And GIS kind of allows us to, visualize, analyze, and manipulate this data, again, to extract patterns that allow us to understand where things are, how they're related, and what those connections are. You probably, use GIS already. Maybe some of these are familiar. I use a few of these. All of these have some sort of GIS component that's utilized. Basically, any app with a map uses GIS because your position on the planet is related to that. And some, are a little bit more kind of abstract. But again, all of these kind of use GIS. So you're probably already almost experts in a way with some of these tools. Greg, did you want to speak on the eBird?
Yeah, so I just wanted to take a quick reading of the group as well and say how many of you folks that are joining us this evening use Merlin or eBird? I love to see that test. My favorite apps. They're my favorite as well, but I guess I'm a little biased. So, just really quickly, how many of you are using these with your students, not just in your personal time? Yeah, seeing lots of examples. So I just wanted to, throw out another example. You all are using GIS software all the time, and these apps wouldn't have half the power that they have without this type of technology. So just wanted to throw that in there as well. Thanks, Catherine.
Yeah. So you already use GIS applications probably in your everyday life. So how do you kind of get more into the nitty gritty for your own use case rather than using something that somebody has already built? This is just a small sample of all of the kind of options that are out there from many different levels of accessibility and like technical complexity. All of the bolded items I have personal experience with and can speak to, but again, all of the other ones, I know exist and have, interacted with other people who have used them or have viewed products created from them. So there is a lot out there at the free level. And then some of these do have kind of like service subscription tiers that you can pay to gain more access to. But just from the, right out the door, there's a lot of free resources. Google Maps, Google Earth is really accessible and easy to use because a lot of people are already familiar with the Google ecosystem. QGIS is the kind of desktop software equivalent to the proprietary software that's on the market right now. OpenStreetMap is a great resource. They have a lot of like mapping marathons. It's kind of like crowdsourced, digitized mapping. They do a lot of projects after natural disasters and stuff like that to kind of speed up the process of understanding the transportation network. So all of these can be used in many different kind of use cases and have different like levels of access depending on how comfortable you may be with coding or maybe just using Google. So there's a lot out there for you to get started that you don't have to spend a single penny on for all different kind of tiers of technical ability. I primarily use Esri products for most of my GIS work. They're one of the forefront providers of GIS services, products, and infrastructures. They're very similar. I like to relate it to Google in terms of like, you have the Google brand, and then under Google, you have, Gmail, Drive, Sheets, all those kind of different applications and products that are kind of hosted within that ecosystem that speaks to each other easily between products. Esri is the same way. They offer many different kind of different things for people to use depending upon their needs. And it's so much more than just maps. There's data, there's collaboration, all sorts of stuff, and they have pretty attractive subscriptions for the academic, nonprofit, and museum spaces. So they do a really good job making it accessible, especially for educational purposes. They are actually a nonprofit, so they do really well for other nonprofits as well. And again, there is this paid tier for Esri, but they offer so much at the free level. Products, data, training, and tutorials all are completely accessible for free and provide a really great kind of dive into GIS for as much as you're interested in. So again, this is GIS helps us with the place-based storytelling where, location is a character. Sometimes maybe it's the main character and other times it might be supporting. But location The spatial aspect is very intersectional. It has, the past, present, and future. It has many different facets that can be brought up from it, from, natural history, cultural history, and then maybe more, that we're familiar with the quantitative and qualitative data that can be from a specific location. But what I also find place-based storytelling to really be about is that in community engagement component, because it allows us to kind of create that personal connection with a place and understand, how, okay, we're here, but we are also related to other places, and those connections that exist. There's also the aspect of data collection. You can have a static location, but you can collect many different types of data within the same location. Very similar with the intersectionality of this. There's a lot of layers that one, location can have in many different aspects. And then the interactivity, kind of like moving through time and space and interacting with, physical features on a map, and kind of diving into the data and looking at images. I find that it really kind of brings the place to you and allows for interactivity and engagement that you may not necessarily get with other formats. So that's Esri Story Maps. They are kind of the tool for this, in my opinion. They're very much kind of location narrative driven products that allow you to kind of create this guided narrative of whatever your theme or topic may be. They're really easy to use. It's completely drag and drop functionality, but if you feel inclined, there is aspects of coding with HTML that you can incorporate. So the possibilities are kind of endless with what you can kind of design. And then the other part is it doesn't have to be spatially centered. The kind of spatial component of a story map can be as much or as little as you want it to be. They are primarily image and graphic focused. They support a lot of different formats for videos and sound, and the ability to embed other content. So it really provides this beautiful kind of visualization that immerses you into it. And it connects easily with the Living Atlas. As I mentioned, Esri offers data as one of its offerings, where the Living Atlas is free, authoritative, and user-generated data and imagery that is, again, completely free and available to be used for whatever your purposes are. They do, again, offer more content for a price, but the offerings at the free level are pretty impressive for authoritative data. So were there any questions before the demo regarding the slides?
Yeah, I saw a couple folks had their hands up. And so if they wanted to just take a moment, I saw Gerald had a hand raised, and Paola had a hand raised as well. So if you folks don't mind, you can feel free to type your questions in the chat, and we'll have Katharine answer those before we get to our demo. And if there's any other folks that were sitting on a question that they wanted to ask Katharine about the beginning portion, now is a great time. Oh, oh, that's no problem. So it was a mistaken raised hand, but you know what? I'm sure that we'll have some questions here in the next phase. So while Katharine is doing the demo, if you folks do think of something, go ahead and type it in the chat, and I'll find the right time to bump that over to Katharine, and we can hopefully answer some of your questions right there in the moment. Oh, we just got one. So it said, what are the appropriate grade levels that this can be used with?
For kind of viewing, I think any age group could definitely interact with a story map. For creating and designing, I would probably say sixth grade plus. I am not an educator. Maybe Greg can speak a little bit more to what he thinks is more appropriate, but it is, again, very easy to use.
I think honestly that was a perfect answer, Catherine, because I liken this to, if you've had students that are maybe familiar with WordPress or, if you can make a PowerPoint and use some of the advanced functionality, you can absolutely use Story Maps. So I would say it kind of does depend on the proficiency of the student in particular, but middle school up, I would say is appropriate for sure. All right. I think for now, then we can go ahead and hop over to our demo. And yeah, feel free to type more questions in the chat. You're welcome, Lynn. No problem.
Alrighty, let's start with the demo. So you're probably wondering, well, if I wanted to create my own story map, where would I even begin to go? So I'm just going to give you a quick kind of like where to go and how to get there. If you wanted to spin up your own story map, Esri does offer free public accounts. So again, everything that I'm going to show you tonight is going to be completely accessible with that free public account, no pennies spent. Once you do create your public account, you'll sign in to ArcGIS Online. And ArcGIS Online is kind of the Google Home where it's like your content manager. So StoryMaps has like a different portal, but you can view your story maps in ArcGIS Online. You can look at the data layers, access the living atlas. It's kind of like your home base for being able to navigate to the different areas within the Esri ecosystem. So I'm going to sign in and it'll bring you to the launch page, which is a great resource for getting started. These different cards take you to tutorials to do to make different products. The free account offers the Make a Map, which is like a web-based mapping where you can view data. Make a Scene is for 3D visualizations, both local and at a global scale. The public account offers the instant apps. There's a whole slew of these kind of quick to configure instant apps that also have the same drag and drop functionality as the story maps. And then very last one, we do have Make a Story, which is referring to the story maps. So I'll show you where to go if you want to begin on your own. So you navigate to your content, which is again like your content manager. Here's all of my data, and then you would create an app. And you'll see you can have a choice between the two app products that you're offered. With this one, we're going to go ahead and open up the story map. So it'll launch you into your very first story map, which kind of provides you with this blank slate. And from here, the functionality is basically adding what they call elements. So these are all of the different elements that you can add. They have, a slew of choices. Again, it's so much more than just images, and you can add other existing apps and videos from YouTube. There's a lot of things that you can kind of put into this and arrange via elements. There's also options for designing. No two story maps look exactly the same. Different kind of colors and fonts that you can choose. So it really is very customizable from the get-go. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go into a story map that I've been working on, and we're going to make it just better. We're going to add more interactivity, focusing on some of the more immersive elements that I find for story maps that are the most engaging. And it starts you right off with, this kind of title page where I highly recommend, using your high resolution, attention grabbing image. It also supports video formats like short, 5-second clips is another really great option. And then you kind of begin to scroll through your story map. And again, absolutely everything is configurable to whatever you are interested in. This particular story map, I created a narrative of talking about the spotted lanternflies in the United States and how they got here, how to ID them, and, ways to help combat them. So, you usually pick a kind of a topic or a theme and you devise a narrative. I recommend kind of outlining your narrative before you even begin to create your story map so that you kind of have like this backbone to go off of. And all of these are interactive sections, and this is currently the view of the viewer. So this is what the URL will look like if you click on it as a link that you're sharing. So this will look a little bit different once we jump into diving in, but we're going to add some new sections in here because it's a little bit lacking and I want it to make it just that much more immersive. So we're going to move now into the kind of design and editing view, which will look very different behind the scenes. Again, everything is customizable. You have the option to have your section headers as these kind of quick link navigations. So if I click on any of these, it allows me to be brought right to those sections. They support GIFs and imagery. And again, you can kind of configure the way that you want your images to look. Is anybody familiar with the spotted lanternfly? Have we seen any of these in our locations? I can't see the chat, Greg, so you'll have to let me know.
A lot of people are saying that they have seen them, and I'm just curious, what are your locations that you've seen them in? New Jersey, NYC, in Korea, not thankfully not in California, Pittsburgh, New York, Connecticut, Southern New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, pretty much everywhere in the
Okay.
United States. Irene, no, that's good. Michigan, Maryland.
All right. Well, great. So we do have some familiarity with our theme here. So I've included some images for the viewer to be able to identify the different life stages. And then I have a section here where I, kind of want to, again, make our place-based storytelling focused around, they came from a location where they were native, and now they've kind of moved into these other areas where they are kind of less native. So I really want to connect that and kind of bridge that gap between, okay, Asia is so far away, but how do we, kind of visualize and conceptualize that? So I'm going to add one of the immersive elements, which is a map tour. And we're going to start from scratch. And a map tour is kind of like you're moving through different points on a map that you've selected. And there's two options that have two secondary options for how you want them to be displayed. The guided tour is like your, A to B to C, and the Explorer tour is kind of where the user gets to choose which points they want to interact with in what order. I'm going to do a map focused guided tour because I want to highlight the spatial aspect of where these bugs came from the most. So it's going to open up as this like little editing bar, and we're going to go ahead and add 3 slides for the 3 countries that this bug is native to. And we're going to go ahead and add locations. So we've got China. Oh, I think we're starting the wrong order. All right, so add location. Our first point is going to be China. So just kind of click anywhere to drop your point. And then we're going to do our second location in India. And we're in the southern portion. And last but not least, Vietnam. Just over here. And I've got some content generated that I'm going to add in. Again, there's a couple different ways you can link if you have your images hosted elsewhere, or you can upload them locally. So I'm going to add my images in. And I also have accompanying text that I've prepared to give context to each location. And again, this doesn't have to be a static image. You can add GIFs. That is the wrong one. Very easy to fix. And just like that, I've made a guided tour with 3 different locations. Once we exit out of editing mode, these black panels here will disappear and it'll be more seamless. So this is, again, just what it looks like in the editing view, but it will display differently once we're in the viewer. And I'm going to go ahead and change the base map. I don't really like this kind of default option. You have several different ways that you can, again, display. There's always going to be probably more choices than you know what to do with. So I'm going to select our aerial imagery with some of our reference information to help orient our viewers when they get to this section. And then, so some other components with when you add different elements with your selections, you can kind of, configure them however you'd like. In this instance, what I've done is I wanted to kind of show the change over time to demonstrate, the kind of before and after as these bugs expand their range. So I have created both a kind of broken timeline that has a swipe function between each kind of event period. So the timeline, you can have it kind of continuously. In this case, I have it broken up where between each time setting, you can kind of view the data. And what we're looking at here is living atlas data that I've configured in a web map to display the points of the GBIF spotted lanternfly observation. So this is, we have 2004 on the left, and then 2014 on the right in China. And we can, easily swipe between. This is probably one of my favorite elements because it can be very impactful if you have the right kind of imagery. And then here, we have it moving into the United States. In 2016, its first observation was recorded. So you can kind of see, again, we were kind of spatially centered here in Asia, and now we're moving, worlds away to the United States. And once it arrived in the United States, you can kind of see just, again, how dramatically it spread. And I just love this swipe function. I think it's really impactful. And then it kind of continues, with more of your narrative. And here is where I really want to kind of like bring that, we're talking about Asia, we're talking about the United States, but like, what about in my own backyard? So this is the section where I'm going to kind of connect to our viewer to see, is this something that they have in their backyard? How would you know? So I'm going to add in a map that I've already pre-configured out of living atlas data for iNaturalist observations. And this is a map of the filtered iNaturalist observations for just spotted lanternfly. So I've taken this free authoritative data and I've manipulated it to what I kind of care about, which is just showing the spotted lanternfly. So in addition to being able to view free data, you can also manipulate it for your own analyses. So I have my map here, and this is going to allow people to click once I edit the settings. It's not popping up for me the way I hoping. There we go. Okay, so I want to keep the pop-up open, allow for searching, and we don't need a legend. So now we're going to see. I'm clicking too fast. So this is an observation that was recorded by somebody using iNaturalist on May 21st in 2024, and it's some of the nymphs. So this allows, the user to kind of say, hey, I live in, Georgia or Colorado. Are other people seeing this this bug here? So it really allows them to kind of connect their locality to this larger global phenomenon that's happening. And then in this section, what I am going to add is the other really immersive element, which is a sidecar. And there's a few options for this, docked, floating, or slideshow. It's just kind of how it visualizes. I personally enjoy the floating. And with that, we're going to add a few slides. So this is a great section for kind of highlighting your imagery along with some kind of like narrative text. So I have my my text slides here. I'm going to pop in there. So I've got my slides and I'm going to put my text. And in this section, I'm going to focus on helping my viewers learn how to identify the host plant for these spotted lanternflies, which is the Atlanthus, also known as the tree of heaven. And it is not very pleasant tree to deal with. So I have my text on my slides and I'm just going to pop in my images. But again, it's you're really kind of limited only to what you can imagine. There's so many different options for being able to embed and visualize what you want to communicate using this tool. So I've got a picture here of some of these guys on a tree feasting on it. And I see that, you know, hey, it's actually kind of blocking what I am trying to display. So we're going to change that. I'm going to make that image a little bit clearer there. Move on to my next slide. And again, just keep adding these images to make it a really kind of immersive, visually engaging experience. All right, and then last but not least, we've got our suckers, which is what happens when you cut down one of these trees. They're pretty resilient. So now I have, you know, another great immersive element that my viewer will be able to learn how to identify this plant. And before I wrap up my story map, I want to leave my viewer with some resources. So I'm going to just put in a section here. And this is a text element, which is what most of this story map is made out of. And I'm going to just quickly create it as a header. And I'm going to embed some of these resources that I've found. The resources I've selected are for kind of demonstrating the various things that can be put into here. So in this case, I have a YouTube video that I want to embed. This is for native lookalike. So, you know, we obviously don't want people removing the wrong tree. And then I'm going to add buttons, which are kind of like these little links that are nicely visualized in these kind of button formats where you can kind of click and it'll navigate or provide you with a different resource. In this case, I am providing the VA Department of Forestry. I am Virginia based. So I will be using that. And this is going to be a PDF. So when they click it, it's going to download. And I'm going to add one more for broader still, USDA. And there is a text limit. Sometimes that happens, but infrequently enough. Nope, don't need that one. I want this one. All right. So I have just added some resources in a new subsection. I've added an immersive scrolling imagery visualization. I've added a map using living atlas data that my viewer can interact with. And then I have our guided tour that we added to kind of highlight where these bugs were coming from originally. So I think I've improved my story map and now I'm going to go ahead and publish it. You do have two options for sharing. Public is everybody can see it, but you can also keep it back as private. So, you know, during editing and all that. So it doesn't have to always be out there if you're in the editing stage. And we're going to just view my story real quick. So this again is like the final viewer form. And we're going to make sure that all of our elements kind of added in. So this is, again, the guided map tour. We're going to go through China to India and then to Vietnam. And then we're going to look at the kind of timeline and the differences between our satellite imagery and observations. And we're going to move back to our iNaturalist observations, where you can kind of click and, again, interact with collected data. And then we've reached our sidecar, and this is how it displays. Again, just really beautiful scrolling images with accompanying text that kind of really just, again, immerse you into the scene you're displaying. And then we're going to end here with our resources. So like I said, you can kind of just click and it'll take you to, whatever you want to kind of connect other people with. So that is our story map. You start with a blank space, and you can kind of, again, customize it to many different ways. I don't think I've seen two story maps that look the same.
Well, Catherine, thank you so much. That was fantastic. And we do have a couple questions that I held off to the side. But yeah, thank you again. I mean, that was visually very appealing. I'm personally a massive fan of the swipe tool. I just can't think of something so, powerful but so simple is just to kind of do a really quick comparison. Um, yeah, so thank you again for focusing on that. I want to get to some of these questions. So, um, we had a question from Kelsey who was curious if you're able to make story map templates that are shareable with your students so they're not having to start from absolute scratch when they're making these.
Yes, there is the functionality for templates, but that is at the paid tiered level.
Mm. Gotcha. That makes sense. Got to save some stuff for the paid subscription. So, Kelsey had another really great question. Um, she had tried to use story maps with some of her students previously about a month ago and said that one of her students was having some issue where he wasn't able to find the text that he had added. Do you have any sort of recommendations for troubleshooting?
Yes, this has occurred to, or has happened to me too. Always save. I cannot express enough. Always constantly save with Esri. If you navigate outside of the editing window without saving, it drops all of your work. It's a little bit frustrating that there isn't a built-in, are you sure you want to leave? So I would just recommend, constantly, just every 10 minutes hitting that save button.
Awesome.
A
Yeah,
few,
thank you.
a few other ones that I saw just that they just posted right now. Casey asks, how did you export iNaturalist map data, and did you use the Living Atlas for that?
Yes, I used the Living Atlas for all of the data that we looked at tonight. And with that, when you bring it into your web map, which is something we didn't explore today, but when you bring it into your web map, which is kind of like the container for your data to visualize, you have the option to set filters for that data. So I set a filter that said genus is this and a species is this. So it limited that data set to values that met that logic criteria.
Okay. And then
And
goes with this question. Sorry, Greg, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Yeah.
No, because I think it goes with this one. Can you say more about how you Claire asked this. Can you say more about how you cleaned up the iNaturalist data to create the map? So it's kind of going in the same direction
Mhm.
as you then answered.
Yes. So when you open up your web map on the right-hand side, you'll have an option for filtering, and you basically create a SQL statement that's the or and if else kind of thing for the criteria for your data set. So again, I just said my genus is I'm not quite sure off the top of my head what the spotted landerfly is, but I said the genus to that and the species to that. So it's a two conditional logic question for the database, and then it filters your view based upon whatever logical conditions you're putting it into. And I believe you can do that for any of the Living Atlas data.
So one thing I just wanted to add is that you can also download data from iNaturalist and then upload it into Esri. So if you want to do the cleaning on the side of iNaturalist, you can do it that way as well, and then just download what you're interested in initially. I will say that that's a little bit more difficult to set up. But there's tons of resources online if that is something that you're interested in. And another thing that I just find so powerful is that the iNaturalist observations that Catherine was clicking on are real observations. So if your students are saying, hey, let's do a story map about our school location, and they had observed things on iNaturalist nearby, they could see their actual observations on the story map through iNaturalist. And, that's their actual data that they into iNat. So it's a really cool function.
Question
Yeah.
with that, Greg, is
Mhm.
when you input it onto the Esri or the story map, does it populate? Like if you get new iNaturalist data, are you getting that populated onto your story map, or you're getting just the data that you got from like the collection that you have from that time that you retrieved it from iNaturalist? Or is it just like ongoing new information that keeps on?
So for the iNaturalist data, it only displays the research grade observations, so no casual. And I believe it updates monthly. So every month, a new data set is published with, so it is constantly updated, but in a month interval.
That's wonderful.
And another really great reason to use the Living Atlas, because if you download it off of iNat and then put it in your Esri account, it won't update. So you would get that functionality through using the Living Atlas. We had another great question. Um, so do you have a recommendation on a length for story maps? How long should one be? We to make sure that they remain readable and useful for high school classrooms, but not too long that it's hard to, or that you end up like losing the plot of the story.
Yes, so I usually try to recommend to stick to one topic and kind of like one central concept. They offer now, it's called collections, which is a way to kind of aggregate individual story maps into a broader topic or theme. So that's great for like, okay, I have all these things I want to talk about. I don't want to make this excessively long story map. So you'd break those story maps down into like individual concepts and then kind of collect them under this story map collection that has kind of, again, the broader theme. So for length, I try to keep it for, maybe less than 10 minutes of, interactive and scrolling uh, effort and time. And then, if I feel like I am kind of expanding upon more than I want to, then I just kind of create a new story map and just put it under a collection.
One last question that I noticed from the chat that this one snuck past me. Um, does using high resolution files, like pictures or imagery, does that slow down your project like it might if you were using a really large file on a website?
Um, Story Maps does have limits to the kind of media that you can upload. I believe it is 10 or 5 megabytes and 5,000 pixels. So they do kind of constrain you to that. And for in terms of lagging, I haven't personally found anything that has ever really caused issues. I always just recommend ensuring that your latest drivers are updated.
Good advice. So we had another question about eBird data, asking if the Living Atlas has access to that. I don't think as of yet. And it also has a little bit to do with the type of observations that you're making. So on eBird, you're doing like a concerted effort where you're walking a trail, you count how many people you are contributing to your effort. It's a different style of observation than the one-off singular location observations that are associated with iNaturalist. So because you can up the count of the birds that you're witnessing on your eBird journey, it's not marking their exact location. So I think that there's a little bit of a difference there. Um, Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Catherine. Again, that was fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. We're going to do a lightning round of resources for educators, but as always, folks, we will send you a follow-up email in about a week or so that'll have all of these links that you're welcome to peruse at your own time. Just in the interest of what we have left this evening, I'll hit a couple of the highlights. Okay, so on to sharing some resources with you all. So this is kind of the zoomed out version. We've got all of our links available. I kind of categorize them, so things that are specific for K-12 according to the Esri website, things that are more general story map resources and guidance. This gallery right here, if you're thinking, yeah, I mean, this is a really great tool, but I'm not sure if I'm ready to dive right into this today, check out their gallery. There's some really beautiful story maps that are already created. And you might find that the topic that you're looking to highlight has already been represented. And then another thing that I can't prioritize enough is this Esri community. There's a specific one for K-12 education. You can actually zoom that out a little bit, and there's, higher ed, informal ed talking groups. So, I'm not sure if any of you folks, I'll pull my chat open, use Canvas, but when I was in the classroom, the Canvas community is really what helped me deal with 99% of my issues with the platform. So definitely make sure that you check out the blog posts and discussions that are happening on the Esri community if you are running into any sort of issues or just have a question. So again, the K-12 education website is kind of going to give you some information on how to gain access. It'll get you to that community that I just mentioned, and it'll show you some examples of educators that found this technology useful in their classrooms. There are some example lessons that you might find are perfect for you in your classroom, or you might find that they need a little remixing. But at any rate, you don't necessarily have to start from ground zero. And so this one here is actually a video. I just wanted to show you if you're on their project-based learning page, they have a few ongoing projects that are up and running. If you wanted to kind of get involved with these with your students today, these are projects that are open to the public. You might also be inspired by one of these topics and think of a project that you're interested in working on with just your classroom. So again, in the interest of time, I'm going to move on, but those links are right there on the screen for you, and we'll send those out as well. The Story Maps gallery that I was just mentioning, I'm going to give one a particular shout out because I am a marine biologist by trade, so I have to highlight the nudibranchs. So over here in the chat, I'm just dropping off a link for one of the beautiful story maps that are in this gallery. But again, you're going to find just pages and pages worth of topics that you might find useful. Some additional resources. Again, this one is a video, but the link is on there. So do make sure that you take advantage of everything that Esri has to offer in the way of helping you all use their product. And there's that Esri community, like I mentioned, you can see the K-12 topic right there. But there are several different categories that you might find are fitting for the question that you're looking to have answered. All right. So, are there any additional questions? Anything last second before we tie things up for the evening? We're getting close to our time. Got my chat open here, so if anybody has anything, feel free. And in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and put up our contact information. So, yeah, I'm not seeing any additional questions, just thank yous. And again, thank you so much, Katharine, for joining us. We couldn't have had a better guest this evening to help us work through some of that information. Yeah, and like I said, so we normally take about a week to get the recording and the email out to everybody, but feel free to reach out in the meantime if you have any questions. Thank you all again for joining us this evening. And or did we get a
There's
last
one
minute
question.
question? Gotcha.
One person's asking any examples of eBird data in a story that you might know of, or
Not that I know of off the top of my head. But if you have a specific question, feel free to reach out to us and I can give you a more thoughtful response over email if that's okay. Want to definitely take a chance to think about that one a little bit. Awesome. So, okay, well, with that, folks, thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Take care.